For so many of us, we spend time looking for ways to understand and improve how our organisations work and trying to figure out how we can support staff well-being and staff performance, and we bump into all kinds of challenges that can get in the way. If that sounds like your experience, then welcome to the conversation. We're Dr. Annie Gascoyne and Ross McIntosh, and we're organisational psychologists who really care about this stuff. We use contextual behavioural science to help organisations and the people working within them to build skills to cultivate flexibility for improving performance and well-being. In recent months, in our conversations together, we've really noticed that some common themes keep coming up. And together we've been exploring our approaches to dealing with them. Rather than keeping our conversations to ourselves, we figured that it might be helpful to share some of them with you in a series of videos. In this video, we're going to be talking about a theme that keeps on coming up on our radar: sitting with discomfort. So pop the kettle on, settle in, and get ready to get comfortable with exploring discomfort. I think it might be a useful starting place to define what we even mean by sitting with discomfort. I know that you and I talk about this quite a bit between us, what we mean by it, but it sounds like a bit of a strange thing asking people to almost be uncomfortable.
Yeah, because I think we can probably look at this from an individual and an organizational perspective.
Mm.
And feeling uncomfortable, that sensation can often pop up for people in the workplace. Those feelings of discomfort, and then it can impact what they do next. And what they do next if they're not willing to sit with that uncomfortableness perhaps isn't as productive or as healthy or as meaningful as it could be. I think that's my first attempt at it, Annie.
Mm. Yeah, when I think about it, especially at that individual level, it's all of those sort of feelings. I often really think of that physicalized version of it, that maybe there's a bit of a knot in the stomach or a bit of tension in the shoulders, things like that, that just it doesn't feel comfortable. And it might be because something's a bit scary. The classic sort of idea being that big presentation that we're nervous about doing, that that brings about those physical sensations. But it can also be little thoughts that pop up, the not good enough, or what will they think of me, all of those sorts of things that pop up. So discomfort is about the stuff that's going on inside us and inside our organisations that we find challenging or that we don't really want to experience. But why does this stuff matter? That when we have those uncomfortable inner things, we often swerve and avoid actually going and delivering the presentation or showing up at the meeting or putting ourselves forward for the promotion.
Yeah, absolutely. Or having the performance conversation. That's something that crops up for me a lot. So a leader or a manager has something they want to speak to someone about, something around their performance or the quality or the timeliness of their work. And then immediately they start thinking about, oh gosh, I need to speak to this person. Perhaps anxiety, perhaps, oh goodness me, they're going to kick off. Oh, maybe I should just do it myself for the quiet life. And that inner stuff can influence what I do next. And it doesn't really connect me with what the sort of purpose of my role or how I'd like to be as a leader, because I'm trying to, like you say, avoid that internal stuff.
I've come up with this. There's this imagery that I have, like two magnets that are opposites, and they're when we're trying to do something, we suddenly find ourselves swerving and going in a totally opposite direction, just to avoid that thought or feeling. We almost don't even pay attention to what it is. We've already gone off and done something else, and that really comes up for me when I think about procrastination. That that I think is a great example of this this idea of avoiding discomfort. maybe there's some piece of work that I really ought to be doing, and somehow I've gone down the internet rabbit hole, or, I'm just playing around on some app. And if my mind just vaguely goes towards that piece of work, suddenly I swerve and I'm maybe doing the washing up or hoovering or something other than what I'm supposed to be doing. It's that real disconnection from what's going on inside me.
Or maybe, I love what you're saying. I love this magnet thing. As a boyhood magnet enthusiast, I love that. It's really visual for me. I love that description of that swerve. Because yeah, I can find myself having a bit of a project to do, and I can find myself, rather than doing this project which feels frightening and enormous, I suddenly find myself doing my tax return, which is something, me and my tax return. I'd rather do that than actually sit with and explore this inner stuff.
It's amazingly powerful, isn't it? That it can actually make you do that. Except, obviously, if you were supposed to be doing your tax return, and then you would find the swerve with something else.
I'd probably have the cleanest kitchen cupboards you ever did see. Mm-hmm. It reminds me, Annie, of something I saw on Twitter recently, which was from somebody called Celeste Labeds. And it just really resonated with me, and thousands of other people. And she said, I don't put projects on the back burner. I put them under the floorboards, where the ever louder beating of their hearts drives me slowly to madness.
I absolutely love it. It's such a great image.
Yeah, it speaks to the they're there, they're making that noise. There's a constant drone or discomfort in the background.
Yeah. And what I find fascinating is it can be the big things, like that big scary presentation or the big project. But what I see quite often is it happens in the small to day-to-day things, like showing up at a meeting and having our voices heard, getting our opinion across, saying the things that we want to say. So often there's the thought that pops up of, well, they'll think I'm stupid, or something like that, or what will they think if I said that? And so, in that first meeting, maybe it's all right that I didn't speak up. Maybe it feels a bit disappointing at the end of the meeting that I didn't say anything. But then the next meeting happens and the same thing, because the same kind of thoughts pop up. And then that becomes a career of not speaking up and feeling heard. And that sense of disappointment that we can carry with us, that people aren't listening to me. I've got these great ideas. But that fear of speaking up, just, it becomes a bit sort of habitual that we're doing that avoidance.
Yeah, I think that's really powerful. And I recognize that a bit in myself. And coaching clients, thinking about exactly as you describe. I'm in the meeting. I think I've got something really valuable to contribute here. And perhaps there's a sort of, right, I'm going to craft this. I'm going to craft this contribution right now. And you go into yourself and you come back ready to think, right, I think I'm ready to deliver this now. And they've moved on. They're on now and next 2 agenda items on. Or even worse, just as you're coming back, someone else goes, hey, got this idea. And they present what you're about to say. And everyone goes, that's amazing.
They're a genius.
Yeah. And because you were looking to craft that and not perhaps willing to put forward a not finally honed, finished article, you missed that. And that again can turn into a story of, this is who I am in meetings.
And that really sounded like perfectionism in there a bit for me, that crafting it until it's perfect. If I get this sentence right, then people will listen to me. And so I think perfectionism is another beautiful example of this how we deal with discomfort so often. I see it with students who don't submit their assignment, they'd rather not submit than the assignment being imperfect, and that they are graded with a lower grade than they would like. They would rather nobody actually ever saw it, and that they get a fail for not having submitted than submitting something and getting the feedback and a lower grade than they would like to receive as the symbol of perfection. So those feelings of discomfort about what will somebody else think can really play out and have quite an impact on their grades.
Wow. So it's no wonder we're talking about sitting with discomfort, because we conceived, over through our own experience and through working with individuals and organizations, that this is a problem, an issue that we think we can support. And how does that work I talked at the beginning about an individual perspective and an organizational perspective. How does it work at an organizational level?
We see a real coherence between the way that kind of discomfort plays out at the individual and the organisational level. So let's explore that organisational perspective.
Well, something I see is that we kind of do it as a collective. The phrase that I love is about unconscious collusion, that we kind of get together to try and make things feel comfortable. So we'll put processes in place so that we can try and avoid the uncomfortable situations arising. And there's something that sounds quite nice about that, but what it can mean is not listening to people's voices. If we maybe don't hear what people have to say, we won't hear the bad stuff. So we'll try and ignore if people are raising problems and issues, we'll put processes in place to try and quieten some of that down.
Or could it be a lone voice, say, sitting around a boardroom table, who's raising an issue, and the others do that sort of unconscious or conscious collusion to go, oh no, we don't need to worry about that, or look over there. Sort of distraction.
Exactly. And I think we really like this, having a sense of reliability in organizations, the sort of aim to get things to be efficient and standardized and centralized and hard coded into our systems, so that we have a sense that we know exactly where everything is at. But that doesn't allow for any kind of sense of flexibility when something changes. And so we're putting in place things that feel safe, but aren't necessarily safe for achieving what the organization needs to achieve. They're not the helpful ways forward. They just create that sense of safety. So we're avoiding any change because change might feel a bit uncomfortable.
Is it almost, I've got this really strong visual. It's almost like a Les Miserables, the barricade of chairs and tables, and between us and what's going on out there. I'm not sure whether that works. It was just really strongly the barricade, and I'll not sing, but we create that through perhaps structures or rules that prevent us experiencing what's actually happening. And it may be happening in our environment, with our customers. It may be happening directly in our organization. But there's stuff that could be like rules, governance, paths to raise issues, could be blocking the view a bit.
I love that imagery, the not being able to see through what's going on. I think the imagery that I tend to use is that we create a bit of a groove. So we're going down the same path over and over and again because it feels reliable, it feels stable. But we start to dig ourselves a trench, and then we're in the trench and we can't see over the top. We can't see what's actually happening because we're all in the tunnel.
Blimey, I love what you've just done. I never knew, Annie, that you went to mime school. that was amazing. And yeah, I love the idea of that, wearing that groove. And I guess with curiosity and exploration, you'd be willing to pop your head up and have a look around. But it can feel really comfortable and safe in the groove.
And so much of what we try and do in our organizations is to achieve that, because, you know, it does, things are more efficient when we're not having to deal with all of the different options. Once we've got our clear groove, we know exactly where to plow our resources in, and it feels so safe for everybody involved, from senior management, hey, we've got this, we're in control, through to maybe the most junior members of staff. They know exactly what they're supposed to do. They've got the very clear boundaries, and so this all feels nice. But it only feels nice while it works, which tends to be quite a short-termist way of looking at things. So as soon as something changes in the environment, that could be different people involved, different technology, different strategies within the organization. It could be stuff out there that's happening. Customers are different. Something's changed in the market or regulations. And this groove no longer is a helpful groove. Our trench is going in entirely the wrong direction.
Love it. And the small matter of a global pandemic, for example, happening around us, that I'd suggest that's impacted on most, if not all, organizations.
Yeah.
In terms of where people are working, how their customers are responding, what support they have. And it takes that willingness to, going back to the title of our first topic, sitting with discomfort, to really reflect on what's going on and whether we're still in the right groove or whether we really need to get a ladder and climb out and just pause.
Yeah. And so actually, I think that speaks to kind of how do we solve for this? How do we try and help ourselves and our organizations with noticing discomfort? I think that, I mean, for me, that is such a key part of when we're talking about sitting with discomfort. It's not about trying to find discomfort for the sake of it. But it's much more about a willingness to notice.
So, Annie, we've had a go at explaining what we mean by sitting with discomfort. Let's talk about how we can support both individuals and organizations in approaching their discomfort.
Yeah, so for me, I'm thinking about individuals and their discomfort. I love that word that you used, approaching their discomfort. Being able to notice it's even there, being able to notice and not try and run away from their discomfort, but approach it. And I think this comes back to my weird magnet analogy, that there's a willingness to approach it rather than swerving away, so that we're noticing that the discomfort is there and then making a choice. That doesn't mean that we have to embrace or wallow or whatever in our discomfort, but if we're noticing, for example, with the kind of stereotypical presentation that it's a big one, I'm scared of it, noticing that fear and noticing that, yeah, that's my body trying to keep me safe, and that this thing is important, this presentation, I can still do it. It's important to me to get out there, and so rather than responding based on that discomfort and running away and calling in sick, or finding some other excuse to not be doing it, noticing it and seeing how it can empower us as that kind of energizing excitement side of that instead.
Yeah, that's really powerful. I love the magnets again. So it's, am I willing to get close and notice that sort of almost repulsion? That's a magnet boy phrase, a word. But yeah, it's that in our hectic lives, can we press pause and just notice what's going on? Because we know, that bit of research I quite often quote, that 47% of our waking hours, our minds can be focused on something that we're not doing right now. So they're wandering off. And just bringing it to the now, and maybe noticing that discomfort in our bodies or our minds, in our thoughts. It's something we can cultivate in ourselves, and seeing how what that informs, what that tells us about what's going on, and perhaps how that's influencing in a way that's not that helpful for us, what we do next.
Yeah, I think that's really helpful. And I sometimes think about when I put my head on the pillow at night, what are those thoughts and feelings that pop up that are the ones that might keep me awake? Those are the ones that I've been trying to ignore all day. And so I haven't been very present with what's been going on there during the day. And so I've left it to my poor old mind and body to deal with when everything else has stopped. So what can we do just to create a bit more pause during the day to notice that stuff that's going on and acknowledge it's there, and then choose what to do that's important in this moment?
So we're kind of shining a light on it, that stuff. We're pausing and we're shining a light, which might not be comfortable. But that's our whole point. Because by shining a light on it, that uncomfortable stuff could derail us. We're getting into so many metaphors now, but I think people will understand how metaphor laden our language is, but hopefully that derail describes something that could really not be that useful to us.
Yeah, because those thoughts and feelings are there, right? Anyway, so that they're going to pop up when we put our heads on the pillow. So it's not as though ignoring them, trying to push them away actually helps. So shining the light on them and acknowledging that they're there can help free us up to make choices. I think we think that trying to push things away and suppress it means that it's gone. But actually it hasn't gone. We're fighting it with it, and we're spending energy trying to push it away.
I think that energy deployment point is a really important one. It takes energy to suppress, even if it's unconsciously. It takes energy to suppress that stuff.
Yeah. And I think about this at the organizational level as well, the energy that it takes to try and push dissenting voices away, or to try and focus on things that are efficient, throwing all of our effort and resources on the do that can feel comfortable, rather than actually pausing and noticing what's going on, that I think superficially feels like it's maybe not so efficient, because efficiency, that reinforcement of do that was so prevalent, I think, in organizations, it's not so efficient in the long term. It's not so effective in the long term. If we think about long-term effectiveness, we need to be able to pause and notice what's going on, and build in that practice so that our employees, our managers and leaders are used to doing the noticing. Because I think what we're doing when we're in our trenches is maintaining a message that we don't actually have to look up. And people are unpracticed then at looking up.
Wow. Yeah. So in our trench, say we're doing a big project. We've set the project, we've set the direction, and then we just start borrowing, really, and digging that trench and keep going round and round. We're on the project, and those checkpoint meetings or those milestones where you think, because we say at this milestone, we'll consider, do we proceed? Do we continue with the next phase? And there can be so much invested in it by that point that we go, yeah, hell yeah, of course we do. And we don't want to sit with that stuff that says, excuse me, everything's changed around us.
I love that example. The number of programs that I've been involved in where there's a pilot project up front, that in theory that pilot project is there to test things out, see what works and what doesn't, but there's no pause at the end of the pilot to really reevaluate what really will work in the context of the rest of the rollout and learn lessons. The rest of it's actually already been planned, and we're just going to continue and do the same thing. It was just some poor people had to deal with it up front. But there's not, the lessons aren't learned. We're just going to plow ahead the same trench, just keep going.
So we're not willing to sit with the discomfort of, this is a genuine pause after this pilot. And we will consider whether we're going to proceed. It feels like the big decision was made way back before the pilot. And then, right, boy, we're done. Just crack on. And it's not really a real commitment to pause and think, is what we had planned still right?
Yeah, exactly.
Blimey. It's complex in organizations, isn't it?
A little bit.
Yeah.
And what I really love to encourage instead is this, my little coming out of the trench and reevaluating where are we going? Are we still wanting to go in that direction? Does that make sense? Has something else changed in our environment that might mean that we want to adjust our direction? Or while we were in the trench, were we heading the right way? Have we gone off course? So what can we check in with around that? So having this ability to notice and connect with where it is that we're going as an organization, but also we can think about that for us as individuals. Am I showing up as the person I aim to be? Am I popping out of my trench and going, oh, that isn't quite how I wanted to respond to my colleague. I was a bit short with them. That's not really how I want to act. Maybe checking in with myself through pausing, noticing that I was uncomfortable and that's why I was short with them. What can I do now?
Lovely. So we've paused, we've noticed, and we've talked a bit about the direction, setting the direction. How do we do that? How can we do that as individuals? Let's start with individuals.
The way I think about it is this language around how do I want to show up? What's the person I want to be like? How do I want to express myself? And that's not how I think others want me to be. It's not a societal pressure, but who is the Annie that I aim to be? And am I behaving in that way now? And so have some slight upfront sense of that, so that during my day, I can check in with myself and go, how am I doing? Is there something I can be doing that helps me align better with that?
I like the way you describe this. How do we want to show up as the kind of best version of ourselves, knowing that we won't always be the best version of ourselves? And that's okay, because that's what it's like being a human being. But I guess what we don't always notice, going back to notice just for a moment, is that we don't always notice how we're showing up and the impact we're having on ourselves and the people around us. We don't often always take that time to reflect.
Yeah, so kind of drawing on some of the examples we were talking about earlier. So I can be quite the queen procrastinator at times. And so when I notice that I'm procrastinating, I can slightly laugh at myself, and there's Dr. Dolittle again, and checking in with that and then making a choice at that point. Is this how I aim to show up? Could I be actually picking up the phone to Ross and recording a video, or doing something that feels more helpful, or actually, what other choices are there? What options make sense in this moment for showing up in the way that I want to be showing up?
I love it, and it speaks to that reflective nature of being a human in an organization, whether you're a leader, whether you're a manager, whether you're neither of the above. We all have a way we'd like to imagine ourselves in that workplace, interacting with our colleagues in a certain way. And by being prepared to notice and reflect and think about how we'd like to be, we can use those qualities, I guess, of who we'd like to be as a beacon, as like a beacon for how we show up, thinking, actually, this is the story of who I am at work, rather than the story of perhaps that slightly perfectionist story, wanted to craft stuff in meetings. Maybe I think I want to be generous in meetings and sharing my ideas, and I'm prepared to be vulnerable in that sharing because I want to model to other people that we really welcome ideas and voices from everyone around the table.
I love that, and that it's actually in those small steps. So being generous in sharing an idea in a meeting seems like a really small thing. It's not this big grand, who am I going to be? But it's in those small steps. And me and my imagery, but I have an image of a film reel, an old-fashioned film reel, where each step on the reel is how I'm showing up in this moment and in this moment and in this moment, which then creates the whole film of our lives. So how am I showing up now and now? Can I create something that is the bigger picture of my life story? And sure, there are going to be snips of this film that aren't a perfect me, for sure, and that's all right, because that's all part of the story of me too. But I just like this idea that each new frame is another opportunity for me to check in with myself.
Wow, I love this. I love especially as I'm sitting in a photographer's studio, I love that idea of the winding it forward, and each notch on the film is an opportunity to just again be the person I want to be, and there'll be frames that will embarrass me, possibly make me go, oh really? But this is how I reflect and notice and grow as a human in an organization. I can think of instances last week where I showed up in a way where I do think, oh really, McIntosh? That was how you showed up in that moment? I can do something about it. In fact, I have. I've had a conversation with the person I was with at that point. But it's, are we willing to notice that and think, does that really represent the best version of me? And I can always return to those qualities that do represent the best version of me.
Yeah. Yeah.
So how does this work for an organization?
To some extent, it's that same kind of imagery I play with. I think there's the difficulty for an organization is that's so much grander scale. But I think there's something that is useful to check in with around an organization, and that is, why does it even exist? And I think so many people are going to go, well, to make money. And that's the bottom line, Annie. That's why it's there. And the answer to me is sure, but there are many other ways that it could go about making money. So why is this organization here? And I also think the money idea is, money's the outcome and it's the fuel to keep going. It's essential stuff, but there's a reason that this organization is doing what it's doing, serving the populations it's serving with whatever product service it's got. What's its reason for being? That's the essence of it. Why it's showing up, and how. So the tying a why and a how together to help the employees know why they're there and how they can serve the purposes of that organization. How does that land for you, putting it that way?
I like it. I like it a lot, because I think again, we've talked about how organizations operate in environments that are possibly changing faster than they've ever changed before. And it's that willingness to think, well, what are we here for? we may have a direction that's been really successful for us. And it's delighting our customers, it's making us some wonga, and it can get a little bit complacent, I guess. We just need to keep doing what we're doing, but things change. So is it pausing to reevaluate that and notice the qualities we want to bring to how we are as an organization and using them as our guide and tweaking the tiller when we need to?
Yeah. Yeah, I think so often the argument is, we've got shareholders and we need to respond to making short-term profits for them. And I don't think that helps with the longevity and sustainability and creativity of the organization. What works in the short term can often feel like a kind of a relief, a sense of going through the motions on autopilot. It just feels a bit easier to chase those short-term wins. Oh, we got the pat on the back from the shareholders. Well, the share price went up a bit. But actually, is the organization showing up as it aims to be over the long term? Is it serving the people that it wants to serve in the way that it intends to serve them? Why is the organization here?
So I think you're right. I think it's a combination of checking why we're here, checking if we're still serving our purpose, and then is everything we're doing aligned to that? Because if everything isn't aligned to that, why are we doing it?
Absolutely.
Because I guess some things could be aligned to a direction that's changed. Say you've got a direction that goes like that. Say we shift it slightly and we go like that. In quite a short period of time, we've gone from here to here and we're over there. But if we're still doing stuff that serves us in that direction, then that could be a waste of time.
Yeah. And I don't want anyone to misunderstand that, I'm not saying that the money side of things isn't important. I really don't want that to be the point. But if the organization is serving its aims, then the response is in the financial returns on that, because the customers are responding to it. That's kind of how I see that. So we've been exploring some pausing and noticing, checking in with our direction. Are we still heading the way that we want to go? Is there a new direction that would serve us better in terms of how we want to show up? But what could get in the way, Ross?
Yeah, well, let's talk about individuals first. So what could get in the way? There might be stuff external to us, but what I'm really interested in, and I know you are too, is the stuff internal to us. It's things like those thoughts, emotions, memories, sensations, urges that can stop us pursuing that best version of myself. How am I showing up? What would that best version of Ross be? And then the stuff showing up like, anxiety, I'm quite an anxious chap. There's stuff showing up like I'm not clever enough. I'm going to be discovered for the fraud and the charlatan that I am. And all that stuff can hamper me in my pursuit of the person I really want to be. And it can even cause me to show up as really the person I wouldn't like to be, someone I'm not particularly proud of. But that can get quite habitual. So I guess that's what can get in the way for me.
Thank you for sharing that. And what it really sounds like is that inner stuff is that uncomfortable stuff. It's the stuff that we don't want to be noticing about ourselves. I don't want to notice some of the thoughts that I say about myself, about not being good enough, the imposter I am, and all of those things. They're not nice thoughts, so I'd rather shy away from them if I can.
Yeah, but shining a light on them and becoming familiar with, that's the way my mind works.
Mm.
And it's not broken. I don't need fixing. It's just how we've evolved, and it's keeping me safe. But by shining a light on that, I can actually think, how do I want to be? I can actually pause and reflect. So you see how everything's kind of connected, but can I actually know that it's okay to sit with this stuff? Because this is stuff happening inside of me that's not going to harm me, but or cause me problems. But how I relate to it, I would argue could cause me suffering or not showing up as the person I'd like to be. So I think by just getting a bit of distance and shining that light on them, it can help me really think, okay, McIntosh, who do I want to be in this frame of the film? Who do I want to be in that frame? And just keeps us notching along, with the caveat, of course, that we are human. And I'm not always going to be the St. Ross of Brighton. I am sometimes going to show up as the person that I'm not particularly proud of, but can I notice that and be kind to myself when I notice it, and begin to reconnect with what gives me purpose in a gentle and loving and kind way?
I really love this kind of compassionate language that you're using there, that so often when those uncomfortable and sometimes horrid thoughts and feelings pop up, those things that make us feel this uncomfortable, we end up having a bit of a fight with them, don't we? And we're grappling with them, and we're using our energy to focus on them or push them away. And it's that bit that's detrimental, because we're spending so much time and energy and our physical resources dealing with the rather than being kind to ourselves. We're beating ourselves up even more, going, oh, you're so rubbish that you can't even deal with your own anxiety, Annie, and that kind of stuff. It's sort of self-perpetuating when we fight with it in that way.
Yeah. So how do we scale this up for an organization?
So much of this is about being open to seeing what's happening. I want to use the word vulnerable. I don't know if that lands for everybody, but it can feel quite scary to admit that these things might exist within an organization, that there are uncomfortable parts of an organization. For us to be willing to notice that they're there can feel scary. So that sense of vulnerability is there. But what comes up for me now when I think of the word vulnerability is good old Brené Brown saying that the flip side of that is bravery. So when we are doing anything that's brave, necessarily it comes with things that make us vulnerable. And so can we bravely notice what is going on in an organization that feels uncomfortable, that helps us to notice what's going on, and do more that aligns with what our organization is all about?
So it's noticing what's going on. It's that, I love the way you describe it. It's an act of bravery to notice what's going on, or perhaps admit you don't know the answer. And that's okay, because in sitting with that discomfort and pausing and doing that as a collective, rather than perhaps, oh, look over there, or trying to suppress a voice that might be voicing uncomfortable elements or issues, we can sit with it and pause and think, what is that telling us?
Yeah, absolutely. And just like inside us, noticing our thoughts and feelings, being able to notice different people's perspective within the organization, that there are some people who are going to be getting on fine, some people experiencing something really difficult at the moment, some voices that really need to be heard, that there are so many different perspectives within the organization. And it doesn't mean that all of them are going to dictate the way forward, but all of them are taking their own steps from their perspective, and they may be useful. So recognizing which of the voices are useful for helping the organization move forward in its valued direction.
Thank you. And I think we're just acknowledging how complex it is to be a leader a human in an organization, and how complex it is to be an organizational unit in a world that's changing, uncertain, and requires quite attentive navigation to how we make our way through obstacles and fluctuating demands and issues.
Yeah, I love you acknowledging that. I think that's so important. It is challenging, and I think it's so natural for us to want to control it, to put it in a nice little safe box or trench with my completely mixed metaphors. But that sense of safety, if I could just get this under control, it makes things feel safer, which is completely understandable. But we need to check in and make sure that that also is helping the organisation in its long-term aims as well.
So what are your thoughts about sitting with discomfort? We'd love to hear from you in the comments, or click on the links in the doobly-doo below to get in touch.